Hey everybody, Derek here to bring you another video for The Walking Dead Season 5. And this video is going to be about a person named Pete, Pete the surgeon. Um, when they were on their way to the Alexandria safe zone in the last episode, we found out that Noah's limp is actually something that he's had for a while. I mean, I was very shocked when I found out that he limped before. I never really noticed it. In Slabtown, and it turns out that he does limp. And Aaron and Eric mentioned that there is a surgeon in the community named Pete who might be able to help him. And when I heard that, my Walking Dead sense went off like that. I was like, oh my gosh, Pete. And if you're a comic book fan, you know exactly what that means and the kind of stories that may be in store. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to make a video about Pete, who he is, his story in the comics, and how I think that might be incorporated into Season 5. Because I think that we're going to see him this season. The fact that they've mentioned him now, and the fact that the stories that they're going to need to do, I think, this for the rest of the season, I think it's going to be involved with this season. So that's why I feel it's essential to talk about it. If you do not want to be spoiled, don't watch the video because this will be a spoiler video. I will be telling who Pete is and what he's about. So if you don't want to know, don't watch the video or else you will be spoiled. Okay, so Pete Anderson is actually a doctor in the Alexandria safe zone. He was a medical professional, and I think he was a surgeon, but it doesn't really, matter in that respect. The fact of the matter is he is a doctor. He's married with a wife named Jessie and a son named Ron. And in the comics, when Rick's group arrives at the Alexandria safe zone and they start to get to know people, they do meet up with Jessie and Ron and Pete. And Rick notices that Ron has a black eye, which definitely leads him to wonder, what happened here. And, like a cop, because Rick is a sheriff, cops generally do investigate domestic assault cases. If a kid shows up to school with a black eye, I mean, there's going to be problems. And in general, they tend to investigate these matters to see exactly what happened. And Rick, remembering his cop instinct, asks Ron what happened, and Ron just gives some excuse. But Rick knows that something's up. He's more intelligent than that. So later investigations, and Rick does, talk with Jessie. He does get to, get to the bottom of the matter. He goes around Douglas to figure this out because Douglas kind of tells him to leave the situation alone. Because Pete is a doctor, he's very valuable to the community, and that they need him. So this is an example of Douglas basically just overlooking what's really going on, kind of like Dawn. Dawn was willing to overlook her officers, harming or abusing, sometimes physically, sometimes sexually, the wards in the Grady Memorial Hospital because it was for the protection of everybody. It was for the greater good. Douglas is doing the same thing in the comics. Even though Pete Anderson does beat his wife and kid, he realizes that Pete's a doctor that they need, and if he, interferes with their marriage and their family, Pete might just be like, well, screw you, I'm not going to help you. You got somebody that's sick, let him die. He might be that kind of person, and Douglas does not want to take the chance. So, Rick's very upset about that, and I think that, what it comes down to is Rick doesn't want to see anybody getting hurt in this world. And I think that he does care. He hasn't lost that instinct in him. And he doesn't approve of that. He doesn't approve of just overlooking things. And that's Rick being Rick. If there was a problem going on, he's going to get it solved. He still is humane, and he doesn't want to see anybody getting hurt. Now, what ends up happening is he goes to confront Pete about it, and the two end up getting into a very, very big fight. I think they get thrown through a window, and Rick gets his face all cut up, Pete gets his face all cut up. And Rick ends up getting, they both basically separate them both when it's all done, and people are just shocked at what Rick has done. And even Rick himself is shocked at what he's done. Because it was I think that Rick attacked Pete. I don't think that it was the other way around. I'd have to look again, but I'm pretty sure that it was Rick that was the aggressor. And Rick just, looks at himself, and of course everybody's looking, and they're like, "What the heck? What's going on here?" Um, and definitely puts Rick and the rest of his people in, danger, which I'll explain later. Now, of course, Douglas ends up understanding why Rick did what he did, and he does end up respecting Rick for at least taking the initiative, even though he doesn't like the fact that, you know, Rick went behind his back necessarily. He's mixed about it because on the one hand he says, you son of a gun, you went behind my back, you lied to me, you did this, you did that, and I don't approve of that at all. But on the other hand, he says, but I also realize that, sometimes people need to break rules in order to get to the bottom of things, and he respects that about Rick because Rick ended up, taking a gun and hiding it, kind of like what he does with the blender in Distance. Except he hid his, I think it was just like a small gun. He hid it in his pocket. And basically, what ends up happening with the story is Pete, Jesse, and Ron, they basically separate the family so that there's no more problems for a while. But Pete can't handle that. He really is an aggressive person. And he ends up wanting to go after Rick. He grabs a knife and he ends up killing Regina, Douglas's wife. And it was kind of an accident, like Regina kind of stepped in the way, and Pete, slashed and basically was like moving around a little bit, or like went to shove her, and the knife ends up cutting her neck, and she dies. And at that point, Douglas is just like, Rick, kill this guy, and Rick gladly obliges and blows Pete's brains out. So how will that necessarily be incorporated into the comics? Into the television show. Well, I think that we are going to see that storyline play out some way in the television show. Because one of my big concerns about the Alexandria Safe Zone stories is that you can't really take your time with the Alexandria Safe Zone and expect the show to still be exciting. One of my big concerns moving into this part of the story is that we're not going to necessarily have as much action going on, and that's not always a bad thing. Walking Dead can't always be action, 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 but it was kind of like when you got to that season 4, part 1, when they were at the prison with the virus, and they had to do something because otherwise things were going to be a little too complacent, and you can't have that. So in order to keep this part of the story exciting, you're going to have people going out like on the construction crew, in that story where they basically, kill walkers to defend, themselves while they're building the walls. You're going to have to maybe have a supply run or something that would involve walkers because you need to keep things exciting. You need to keep things going. And in order to do that, you're going to need to cause some kind of a conflict going on in the community. Because I think that what we're going to see is that Rick and the group are going to have a very hard time adjusting to this kind of a community. And they're going to realize that, the way that the people are running the town potentially puts everybody at danger. They've been very lucky that they haven't really run into, as far as I know, that they haven't really run into any major danger. They haven't had a governor. They haven't had a Garrett. They haven't had the claimers. They haven't had, Dawn's people. They haven't had all these terrible things that have happened to Rick's group and have prepared them. So when you see things like this going on and you see like the different nature between the two groups, I think you're going to see that these kind of conflicts are going to start taking place. And I think that one of the best ways to illustrate those differences is to bring in the Pete Anderson story. Because a lot of people in that community, and I'm not judging and I'm not, generalizing everyday life, but in these kind of situations where you have domestic assault, domestic violence, things like that going on, there are some instances where, you know, people overlook the situation. Everybody feels differently about these things, and it's wrong. I mean, the fact of the matter is, domestic violence is never okay. I'm not condoning that behavior at all. Um, but what you sometimes see, and I've seen this, you know, with criminal justice, my criminal justice background, things like that, is sometimes, you know, it's not revealed to the public at all just because it's taking place behind closed doors. You know, the woman or the man, it could be either one, you know, doesn't feel safe going to the authorities, doesn't feel safe to, you know, seek out help because it may make situations worse. But what you also see sometimes is, you know, the neighbors know what's going on. Sometimes the kids know what's going on. The parents, coworkers, people know what's going on, but they don't do anything. And I think that that's kind of what's going on with the Alexandria Safe Zone with this situation is they're more of the type of people who, you know, they're more associated with what the world was before because they haven't, as far as I know, run into all these bad things. So they're going to have that kind of an attitude with it. Whereas when you get Rick getting introduced into the mix and other characters, maybe, you know, Rick's not going to be very accepting of it. And I think that we are going to see a difference between Rick and Pete, which may lead to a similar situation. I'll be very interested to see if they put any kind of twist or spin on it, because I think that no matter what, you're going to have that storyline, and you're going to have Pete basically, you know, having the confrontation with Rick. Um, and I think that's really going to set up some good storylines for this part of the season because what you're going to see is characters starting to act differently. Because I think the community is definitely going to be a saving grace for a lot of our survivors. For people like Michonne, I think Glenn and Maggie are going to start to come around a little bit. And in the comics, what you see is that people, when Rick does this, they start to get really scared. They're like, oh my gosh, this guy is going to get us kicked out of here. And they're concerned. They really, really are. They also understand, you know, why Rick is taking precautions. And they're basically torn between, you know, being their former selves and being these new survivors. And I think that, you know, when you see the title Remember, and you also see what's coming up with the story about how they're struggling to adjust, they've been away from this world for so long that they really don't know how to calm down and settle down and just, you know, enjoy the day. Go play with the kids. Read your morning newspaper. Shave that beard. Get a haircut. Get back to normal everyday life. But they've been out there for so long and they've also dealt with so many things that it's hard for them to do that. And I think you're going to see some people adjusting to that more than others. And that's why you're going to see, like with Rick, he's not going to adjust that much, if at all. And I think you're going to see that with the Pete Anderson story. You're going to see him get to the bottom of the situation. You're going to see him potentially, you know, beat Pete up. And then there's going to be like a discussion, you know, of, oh, is Rick really a danger? And I think that this is really a deciding moment for the group and for Rick himself, because I think that, you know, Rick even himself, when he reflects on that, realizes, like, you know, how terrible it was that he, you know, attacked Pete like that. And he kind of sees the savage in himself. And I think that this is a very big story that he can finally start to realize that, you know what, maybe I have gone a little too far. Am I really that person who can come back? Can I actually, you know, adjust into this community? And can I, you know, be a human again? And I think we're going to see that. And it's going to be very, very telling for Rick. You know, will he become a better character, a better person, or will he continue to descend? And I think that he will start to come back a little bit after this, because in the comics he kind of does. You know, he kind of, you know, realizes what all is going on. You know, with himself, how much he actually has lost his humanity, and the things that he's, you know, done to people. And I can't wait to see this story because I think it's very important. It's not one that you can skip. I'd be very, very disappointed if Pete turned out to be this nice guy. Very disappointed. I think that it's definitely essential for Rick and also, in a way, show the other characters in the Alexandria safe zone, in a way, just how dangerous the world is and what some people are capable of, even behind their own walls. So I'm definitely, definitely anxious for this story. Cannot wait for it. And with that, I'm going to bring this video to a close. I want to thank you all for watching. If you guys have any questions or comments, don't be afraid to leave them. Feel free to subscribe. I do have more videos coming. And if you guys have any topics that you would like to suggest, do not be afraid to do so. I welcome any suggestion. And I really hope that you guys all have a wonderful day, and thank you very much.